The crimson sunset in the painting was eye-catching. The artist had painted it in such a way that the red glare on the water looked like drops of blood. Adele Brown stood in front of the painting, absent-mindedly adjusting the heavy bracelet on her wrist. It was half an hour before the gallery closed, and she hoped no one else would show up. Unpaid rent bills were burning the desk drawer for the second month. Since the death of Marcus Tate, her patron and gallery owner, things had gotten worse. Adele ran her fingers over the picture frame, brushing away non-existent dust. 8 years ago, she'd been an ordinary waitress until Marcus had spotted her in a cheap cafe on the outskirts of Louisville. A knock on the door interrupted the memories. A man in a gray suit stood on the threshold one of Vincent Holt's Collectors. "Miss Brown, we're closed." Her voice sounded calm, though her heart beat more frequently. "Mr. Holt is worried about his investment. You've missed 2 payments." Adele exhaled slowly. "Tell Mr. Holt the money will be in next week. I have an appointment with the buyer." 3 days. The collector smiled with unnaturally white teeth. "You have 3 days, then the conversation will be different." When he left, Adele sank into a chair. The air in the gallery seemed thick, heavy. Dusk was thickening outside the window, and she was about to close the gallery when the door opened again. On the threshold stood a young man, tall, athletic, in an expensive but carelessly worn suit. He looked around the room with mild interest. "We're closed," Adele began. "I know," he smiled. "But the lights were on, and I was interested in the painting in the window. My name is Louis Kedley." He approached the center canvas, a sunset over the river. You could feel the feline grace in his movements. "How much?" he asked, scrutinizing the painting. Adele named a price. Luis whistled, but didn't look surprised. Pulling out a business card, "Think about it." Also, he turned around at the door. "I knew Marcus Tate. He said you had great taste." The door closed. Adele stared at the business card, plain white cardboard name and phone number. The phrase about Marcus swirled around in her head. How could that boy know him? It was finally dark outside the window. 3 days until the meeting with Holt's men, and the young man who'd mentioned Marcus's name. This might be the chance she'd been waiting for. The vintage clothing store, retro chic, smelled of lavender and old fabrics. Ruth Taylor perched on the edge of an antique dresser, watching Adele twirl a business card in her hands. "So he knew Marcus?" Ruth fixed a disheveled strand. "That's odd. Marcus never mentioned any Kedley." "I checked. His father is Henry Kedley, owner of a software company. We met yesterday at a coffee shop." "And how did that go?" Adele covered her eyes, remembering the meeting. Luis was 20 minutes late. Behind his shoulder loomed the massive figure of his bodyguard, Jerome Pierce, an ex-military man with an attentive gaze. "He's 18, Ruth. Got 5 bitcoins from his father for coming of age, and now he's looking to impress. Wants me to be his guide to the art world." "And you said yes? Because of the money?" "Not only that." Adele walked over to the dusty window. "He's hiding something. The way he mentioned Marcus, it was a hint." In the evening, Louis waited outside the gallery, leaning against a black SUV. Jerome kept to the shadows. "Decided to take a night tour?" Adele asked. "Better. I want to show you something interesting." They stopped in front of a columned mansion, Marcus's house. Inside, everything had changed. The dark colors were gone, the heavy drapes had given way to light curtains, but the smell remained the same, wood polish and old books. In the library, a familiar painting hung on the wall, a mountain lake in the sunset light, the first work Marcus had bought on Adele's advice. "He sold it to my father a month before he died." Louis held out an envelope. "Here are the sale papers, and something else. You can read it at home." "What's all this for?" "I want the truth about Marcus, his death, and his debts to Vincent Holt." At home, Adele sat in front of the envelope for a long time. The phone jingled with a message. "Time is of the essence. Holt has plans of his own." The envelope contained an old photograph. Marcus stood next to a man who looked like Henry Kedley. Between them was a dark-skinned woman with familiar facial features, Louis's mother. Vincent Holt was receiving guests in the study of an old mansion on the outskirts of town. A massive mahogany desk, leather armchairs, a collection of antique weapons on the walls. Everything created an atmosphere of old money and power. "Miss Brown," he pointed to the chair across from him. "I'm glad you took the time." Adele sat down, straightening the folds of her dress. After a sleepless night over the photograph from Lewis's envelope, she'd made a decision to meet Holt in person. 3 days haven't gone by yet. "True," Holt smiled. "But my sources have reported your meetings with young Kedley, not the best company for a woman in your position." "He's just a buyer." "A buyer with too much interest in the past." Holt pulled out a cigarette case. "Marcus was careless in the last months of his life, selling off his collection, dating inappropriate people. Did you know he was visiting Elizabeth Kedley?" Adele shuddered. The name from the photograph, Lewis's mother. Did they know each other? Oh yes. The smoke from Holt's cigar rose toward the ceiling. Very intimately acquainted, before she disappeared. Disappearance? 20 years ago. Elizabeth just vanished. Henry Kedley declared her dead 5 years later, then married the current Mrs. Kedley a month later. Holt rose, walked to the window. Marcus never talked about her? No. Too bad. Perhaps that would explain his interest in the boy. And his debts. Adele gripped the armrests of her chair. "I'll pay off the debt in a week. Louis Kedley is buying the painting." "Not anymore." Holt turned. "He withdrew the offer an hour ago. Apparently he found out something interesting in his investigations." The phone rang on the desk. Holt glanced at the screen. "You have 2 days left, Miss Brown. I suggest you find another buyer." Walking away from Holt, Adele dialed Ruth's number. "I need everything you can find about Elizabeth Kedley, and about Marcus's connection to the Kedley family." "Why?" "I think I figured out why Louis was interested in the gallery. It's not about the paintings, it's about his mother." The archives of the city library smelled of old paper and dust. Ruth was flipping through yellowed pages of local newspapers from 20 years ago. Adele sat next to her, looking at digital copies of police reports on a clipboard. "Here." Ruth unfolded the paper. "Secular Chronicle, May 2005. Elizabeth Kedley at a charity event. And guess who's next to her?" In the photograph, a young Marcus Tate held a glass of champagne, smiling at the camera. His hand rested on Elizabeth's waist, a little more intimate than propriety allowed. A month before she disappeared, Adele zoomed in on the date on the photo. And here's the police report. No sign of a struggle in the house, no sign of forced disappearance. She just didn't come back from her morning jog. Or that's how it was meant to be presented. Ruth pulled out the next file. "Look, a week after the disappearance, Henry Kedley sold some of the company's stock. The buyer was an investment fund owned by... to Marcus." Adele leaned back in her chair. "A $5 million deal. Too much for a small block of stock. Sounds like a buyout or a hush fee." Adele's phone vibrated. A message from Luis. "Need to meet. Urgent. No bodyguard." They met in the park, away from the security cameras. Louis looked unaccustomedly disheveled, as if he hadn't slept well. "Why did you withdraw the offer to buy the painting?" "My father forbade it." He kicked a pebble under his feet. "Said Marcus's gallery was bringing trouble. But that's not the point. I found something in my mother's old papers." He pulled out his smartphone, opened a picture of a letter. The handwriting was feminine, hurried. "Marcus, if anything happens to me, the folder in the safety deposit box will explain everything. You know the number. Don't let them hush it up. Elizabeth." "Where did you find this?" "In an old jewelry box. My father keeps my mother's things in the attic." Louis hid the phone. "I checked the bank records. The safe deposit box was emptied the day after Mother disappeared. And you know who did it? Vincent Holt." Adele froze. "How do you know?" "Hacked into the bank's database." He shrugged. "Programming is a family affair. But that's not what matters. A week later, Holt met with his father. And the next day, Dad sold the stock to Marcus. And you think... I think my mother was murdered. And Marcus knew why. And then he was killed too, when he started digging too deep." The evening wind rustled the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a car honked. "Why did you come to me with this?" "Because you're the only one who was close to Marcus in the last months of his life. You must know something." Adele shook her head. "He became distant, became nervous, suspicious, sold paintings, met with strangers." And the bitcoins? Did you know he bought cryptocurrency before he died? What? 5 bitcoins. The same ones my father supposedly gave me. Lewis chuckled bitterly. I found their address in Marcus's address book, but I can't access the wallet. I need the password. Adele remembered her last conversation with Marcus. He'd looked sick, scared. He said a strange phrase to me. The truth is worth 5 coins. I thought he was delusional. That could be a clue. Louise stepped forward. Help me access the bitcoins. There should be information on the mother there. And if there isn't, then you get the money to pay your debt to Holt. It's all fair. Adele looked at him more closely. At 18, there shouldn't be such tired eyes. Why do you trust me? Because you have no choice. Holt will kill you if he doesn't get the money, and I just want to know the truth. Marcus's office remained untouched after his death. Heavy curtains dimmed the light. The walls darkened with empty spaces from sold paintings. Adele ran her fingers along the spines of the books in the closet. There had to be a clue here. Lewis sat at a massive desk, trying to crack the password to Marcus's laptop. In the dim light of the desk lamp, his face seemed drained. Jerome remained outside, guarding the entrance to the mansion. Nothing. Louis leaned back in his chair. The defense system is too sophisticated. He was paranoid about security. Adele motioned to the safe behind the painting. Especially in the last few months. They'd opened the safe an hour ago. Only the gallery documents and a few knickknacks inside. Nothing about bitcoins or Elizabeth. Tell me again how he behaved before he died. Adele sat down on the edge of the desk. The polished wood held the warmth of the old house. Almost never showed up at the gallery. Sold paintings well below market price, talked on the phone in whispers all the time, and then she fell silent, remembering that evening. Then what? Came into the gallery late at night, drunk, disheveled, said he'd found proof, that the truth was worth 5 pennies, and now everything would change. And the next day he was found dead. Louis opened Marcus's day planner. The official version was a heart attack, which was preceded by strange behavior and a collection sale. Adele picked up the day planner. Look, notes in the margins, some numbers. The pages were modeled with entries, dates, amounts, initials. The last page stood out. E.K. new. Gardenia holds the key. E.K. is Elizabeth Kedley? Lewis pitched forward. And what does Gardenia mean? Adele frowned. Wait a minute. Marcus had live gardenias in his bedroom. He changed them every week. The bedroom was in semi-darkness. Pots of flowers stood on the windowsill, withered, forgotten after the owner's death. Adele carefully went through the plants. Here, she pulled a small key from the ground. Looks like it's from a safety deposit box. But the safe deposit box was emptied by Holt. It's a different bank. Adele examined the engraving. First City. Marcus had an account there. Lewis's phone vibrated a message from Jerome. Holt's car is in the driveway. Shit. Lewis grabbed his laptop. Gotta go. They descended the back stairs. A flashlight flickered in the hallway. Holt's men had already entered the house. This way. Adele pulled Luis into the old greenhouse. The glass walls were overgrown with ivy, the perfect hiding place in the dark. They lurked behind the sprawling plants. Through the dirty glass, they could see Holt's men searching the house. Jerome had disappeared, perhaps managed to get away. Why are they here? Lewis whispered. Holt knew we were coming. He's been watching the house. Footsteps approached the greenhouse. A flashlight beam slid across the glass. If they find us... Shh! Adele pulled out her phone, dialed Ruth's message, Plan B, now. A minute later, police sirens blared from down the street. Holt's men hurried toward the exit. Ruth called the police? Lewis peered out of hiding. No, just turned on the siren recording through the speakers in her car. Old trick. As they made their way out of the house, the first rays of dawn were painting the sky gray. Adele clutched the key tightly in her pocket. Meet me at the bank in 2 hours, she turned to Luis. And be careful. Holt won't stop. Neither will you, he paused. You know, sometimes you remind me of my mother, from the pictures. Adele watched him walk away into the morning mist. 19 years apart, and his eyes equally tired. She pulled out the key, ran her finger over the engraving. "The truth is worth 5 coins, she muttered. "What did you find, Marcus?" The First City Bank stood a gray hulk in the center of the business district. Adele sat in the cafe across the street, watching the entrance. Morning bustle filled the street as clerks rushed to work. Couriers delivered packages. Waiters set up tables on the terraces. Ruth was running late. After the night's events at Marcus's house, Adele trusted no one but her friend. The safety deposit box key burned her jacket pocket. "Sorry I'm late." Ruth sank into a nearby chair. "I was followed." "Holt's men?" "No." Ruth sipped Adele's cooled coffee. "Jerome Pierce, Louis' bodyguard." Adele tensed. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. He's been hanging around outside my store since dawn. Had to mix up tracks through the mall." A message from Louis appeared on the phone screen. "Waiting inside. Alone. Something's wrong." Adele showed the message to Ruth. He was supposed to be waiting outside. Maybe he decided to reassure himself? Or it's a trap. Adele pulled out a key. "Take it. If I'm not out in an hour, proceed as planned." The bank lobby was greeted by the chill of air conditioning and the muffled voices of customers. Luis stood at the pillar with his hands in his pockets. A fresh cut was visible on his neck. "What happened?" "Father found out I hacked into his computer." His voice sounded hoarse. "Found my mother's letter. We don't have much time." "Where's Jerome?" "Quit his job this morning. Just sent a text and disappeared." They went down to the vault. A bank teller led them into a room with safe deposit boxes, left them alone. The cool air smelled of metal and paper. "Number 217. Adele found the right safe deposit box. "Give me the key." Louis froze. "You must have a key. You said you'd bring it." They looked at each other in the dim light. Footsteps sounded outside the door. "I'm not the one who sent the message." Louis pulled out his gun. "I'm sorry." The door opened. Jerome walked in, followed by Vincent Holt. "Miss Brown," Holt smiled. "Glad you're so predictable." "They were monitoring the phone." Louis kept his gun down. "Knew our every move." "And you played the part pretty well." Holt patted Louis on the shoulder. "Just like your mother back in the day. She liked dramatic effects, too." "Where's the key?" Jerome took a step toward Adele. "At a friend's. She's long gone by now." "You mean this?" Holt pulled out a familiar key. "Your friend was more cooperative than you think, especially when it came to her store's old debts." Adele felt the ground go from under her feet. Ruth, the one person she trusted. Why all the drama? "Because Marcus left something interesting in the safe deposit box." Holt inserted the key. "Evidence. Against me. Against Henry Kedley. A story from 20 years ago." "About my mother?" Louis lowered the gun. "About money. Always about money, my boy. Your mother found out about the machinations at the company. Was going to turn everyone in. Had to take action." "You killed her." "No." Holt opened the box. "Your father did. And I just helped cover his tracks. Just like I helped with Marcus when he started digging up old cases." Inside the box was a folder and a flash drive. Holt pulled them out, handed them to Jerome. "Now for the final act." He pointed the gun at Adele. "Another tragic death during a bank robbery, and a young witness who heroically tried to save a woman." "No," Louis stepped between them. "No more deaths." "Not your decision." Holt shook his head. "Jerome." The bodyguard stepped forward. A knife gleamed in his hand. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kedley," he pronounced. "It's just a job." The sound of a gunshot echoed off the metal walls. Jerome fell, clutching his shot shoulder. Louis held up the smoking gun. "Job's over." The sirens of police cars came from the street. Real ones, not a recording. "Ruth didn't betray," Adele looked at Holt. "She managed to call the police before you found her." Holt laughed. "You think that will make a difference? I have my own people everywhere." "Not this time." Louis pulled out his phone. "It's all recorded, including the murder confession, and it's already posted online." Foot stomping in the hallway. The police were approaching the vault. "Game over." Adele took the folder from a frozen Jerome. "The truth is worth 5 dimes, but justice is priceless." The police station was filled with familiar sounds, the rustling of papers, muffled conversations, The hum of the coffee machine. Adele sat in the interrogation room, examining her reflection in the mirror. 3 hours of testimony had exhausted her completely. A shadow flickered behind the glass as Detective Morris returned with a folder of documents. A dark-skinned, middle-aged man with a streak in his short-cropped hair and an attentive gaze. Mr. Holt refuses to testify. He placed the folder on the desk. Demands an attorney and claims the tape is fabricated. And Jerome? Sings like a bird. Told me everything about Elizabeth, about Marcus, about today's attack. Adele rubbed her temples. What about Louis? In the next room, testifying about his father's role in all of this, Morris sat down across from her. But I'm interested in something else. The bitcoins. Where are they? The thumb drive from the safety deposit box turned out to be encrypted. Marcus's cryptocurrency wallet still remained inaccessible. I don't know. Marcus didn't trust anyone with the password. 5 bitcoins is a serious amount of money. The detective tapped his fingers on the table. Enough to kill for. Loud voices echoed in the hallway. The door swung open. Henry Kedley stood on the threshold, tall, graying, wearing an expensive suit. Where's my son? Mr. Kedley, Morris rose. You have no right to... I do. He tossed a warrant on the table. I'm taking Louis away. And this woman too. On what grounds? On the grounds that the bank record is a forgery, and murder charges from 20 years ago have no statute of limitations. Kedley smiled. You can check it out. Elizabeth's body was just found, in an old well outside of town, with a bullet in her head. Adele went cold. All this time, the body had been hidden so close. And guess whose prints are on the gun? Kedley pulled out a photograph. Marcus Tate's. Your lover, Miss Brown, the man who killed Elizabeth out of jealousy. That's a lie. They are facts, confirmed by forensics. He placed the forensics report next to the photograph. Marcus killed her and then carried that burden for 20 years until he decided to cover his tracks. Why? Because Louis is his son. He found out shortly before he died. Kedley sank into a chair. Elizabeth hid the pregnancy. By the time I found out the truth, it was too late. Morris studied the documents. That changes everything. Yes, Kedley stood up. My son will come with me. And Miss Brown, I think the police have new questions for her. About Marcus's death, for instance. Louis appeared in the hallway. Pale, confused, he stared at Adele through the glass wall. Son, Kedley held out his hand. Let's go home. You knew. Louis didn't move from his seat. Knew the truth all along. I was trying to protect you. From what? From the fact that my mother was sleeping with 2 men? Or from the fact that one of them killed her and the other covered up the murder? Henry took a step toward his son. Louis, don't touch me, he recoiled. Where are the bitcoins, Dad? The ones you transferred into Holt's account after Mom died? Silence hung in the room. Adele noticed Kedley's hand trembling. You think I didn't hack into your computer? Didn't find old transactions? That was other money. No, Louis pulled out his phone. It was hush money. 5 bitcoins. Just like now, 5 coins for a new murder. He pressed a button on the screen. Henry Kedley's voice came from the speaker. Holt, is it done? Is the body in place? Good. Transferring bitcoins. Detective Morris stepped up. Henry Kedley, you're under arrest. As the cops led Kedley away, Louis sank into the chair next to Adele. You know what I realized? The truth really is worth 5 coins. Only it's not the coins we thought it was. The gallery looked abandoned. Adele hadn't been here since the events at the bank, and dust had managed to coat the paintings and furniture in a thin layer. She turned on the lights. The bulbs flickered a few times before they glowed with a steady glow. Louis was waiting in the center of the room, looking at a painting of a purple sunset. He was wearing the same carelessly worn shirt he'd worn when they'd first met. It was as if the circle had closed. Why did you want to meet here? Symbolic, don't you think? He ran his finger along the frame. This is where it all began. This is where it should end. Adele locked the door. In her jacket pocket was the gun she'd taken from Jerome during the fight at the bank. What do you mean? I found a real flash drive. Louis pulled out a small black drive. Not the one in the safety deposit box. That's the one Marcus hid somewhere else. Where? In the frame of this painting. I noticed the indentation when I first looked at it. He twirled the flash drive in his fingers. Do you know what's on it? Adele remained silent. Luis continued. The whole truth, about how you helped Marcus blackmail my father, about how you gathered information about Elizabeth, and how you faked Marcus's death when he decided to come clean. The air in the gallery grew thick, heavy. You're wrong. Really? He grinned. Marcus recorded every conversation, including the last one when you put poison in his whiskey. Adele felt her hands shaking. She'd kept this secret for so many years. You don't understand. He was going to ruin everything. Turn your father in, confess to killing Elizabeth. I had to stop him. To keep the gallery, the money, or the power over Holt. To protect you, the words came out before she could stop them. If the truth came out, you'd lose everything. Your reputation, your inheritance, your family. Louis froze. You're lying. No. I knew who you were from the beginning. Marcus told me before he died, showed me your pictures, the results of the paternity test. And that's why you killed him? He couldn't handle the guilt, wanted to atone for the sin of killing your mother by ruining her son's life. Adele stepped closer. I couldn't let that happen. Why? Because I promised Elizabeth to protect you. Louis turned pale. You knew my mother? I worked at that cafe where she met Marcus. She told me about you, showed me pictures of you, and before she disappeared, she asked me to keep an eye on you. Silence filled the gallery. A car drove by outside the window, illuminating the room with its headlights for a moment. And all this time, Louis squeezed the flash drive. You manipulated me, exploited my desire to know the truth. I've been guiding you, protected you from the truth that could have ruined your life. By killing my real father? Adele drew her gun. Sometimes you have to sacrifice one life to save another. And now you're going to kill me? Only if I have to. She took the gun off the safety. Give me the flash drive. Louis raised his hand with the drive. You know what's funny? I've been recording everything too, including this conversation. Their gazes met. In his eyes, Adele saw the same steely gleam that Elizabeth had. A gunshot broke the silence of the gallery. Luis collapsed, clutching his hand to his chest. The flash drive rolled across the floor. I'm sorry, Adele picked up the drive. I was really trying to protect you. She watched the red stain on her white shirt blur. Just like in the sunset painting, the purple reflections on the water. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a message from Ruth. Police on their way to the gallery. Anonymous call. Adele holstered her gun and flash drive, looked one last time at Luis. 5 coins for your soul, she whispered. I hope they were worth it. Rain drummed on the gallery roof, washing away the evidence of the crime. Adele methodically destroyed the evidence-wiping surfaces, picking up empty shell casings, mopping up bloodstains. Her hands moved mechanically, as if they belonged to someone else. She hid Luis's body in the back room. She'd have to dispose of it later, but right now it was more important to cover her tracks. There were 2 flash drives on the table, a real one and a fake one. Both held secrets that could ruin lives. The phone vibrated again, the 3rd call from Ruth in the last hour. Adele dropped the call. A friend shouldn't be involved in this. A police siren wailed outside. A real one this time. Adele looked out the window. A patrol car drove past without stopping. Just a routine night watch. You were always good at cleaning. A voice behind her made her wince. Standing in the doorway was Holt. Drenched suit, tired face, gun in hand. How'd you get out on bail? Money opens a lot of doors. He strode inside, leaving wet footprints on the parquet. Especially when you've got dirt on half the city council. What do you want? A flash drive. A real one. Holt stopped at a painting of a sunset. That's funny. For so many years it's been hanging here, keeping all our secrets. Adele was silent. Holt continued. You know, I've always admired you. Such dedication to the cause. First to Marcus, then to his son. It's just a shame that devotion turned out to be a sham. What do you mean? That there was no promise to Elizabeth. You didn't work at that cafe. I checked all the records. A beautiful lie to manipulate the boy. Adele felt her back grow cold. She'd been living a lie for so long, she was beginning to believe it herself. Why do you need a flash drive? Henry Kedley has been arrested. Your role exposed. Because it's not just Marcus's records on there. Holt stepped closer. It's got data on all the transactions, including the 5 bitcoins you stole from Marcus before he died. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. The door swung open. Jerome walked in, holding his bandaged shoulder. Perimeter's clear, boss, but the police got an anonymous call. We've got half an hour tops. That's enough. Holt pointed the gun at Adele. Where's the flash drive? In the safe, behind the painting. Jerome, check it out. The bodyguard walked over to the painting, took it off the wall, opened the safe. There's 2 flash drives in here, boss. Give it to me. Holt didn't lower the gun. Which one is the real one, Adele? Check for yourself. Holt grinned. I don't think so. You're going to check them out right now. Adele turned on the laptop. The first flash drive contained only text documents, the very fake notes she'd prepared in advance. The second one, she inserted the second flash drive. A window appeared on the screen asking for a password. Password. I don't know. Don't lie to me. Holt pressed the gun to her temple. You knew where to find the flash drive. Then you know the password too. The truth is worth 5 coins, Adele pronounced. It was Marcus's password, for everything. Files opened on the screen. Dozens of recorded conversations, photos, documents, and data about the cryptocurrency wallet. That's it. Holt lowered the gun. Jerome, get the laptop. What about me? Unfortunately, you know too much. He raised the gun. So does the boy. Where's the body? In the back room. Check it out. He nodded to Jerome. The bodyguard opened the back room door and froze. Boss, there's no one here. What? The gunshot sounded like a clap of thunder. Holt clutched his shot arm, the gun falling to the floor. Lewis stood in the doorway. His shirt was soaked with blood, but his body armor had saved him from death. Thanks for the tip, Adele. The truth is worth 5 coins is a great password for a cryptocurrency wallet. You knew? She looked at him in surprise. Had a hunch. Too perfect a story about my mother's promise, and too obvious a trap. Jerome reached for his gun, but Louis was faster. The second shot hit the bodyguard in the healthy shoulder. The police will be here in 5 minutes. Louis pulled out his cell phone. The anonymous call was from me, and yes, I did write everything down. Adele stared at him, the boy who'd turned out to be smarter than all of them. What now? Now Holt and Jerome go to jail for killing Marcus, for attempted murder at the bank, for everything else. And me? Louis shook his head. Leave, quickly. I deleted the footage of the gallery conversation. Why? Because you were trying to protect me. In your own way, wrongly, but you tried. He smiled sadly. And because Marcus loved you, for real. Police sirens could already be heard outside. Adele looked at the gallery one last time, at the painting of the purple sunset, at the man she'd tried to kill. Goodbye, Louis. Goodbye. And you know what? He lifted the flash drive. The truth really was worth 5 coins. It's just a shame the price was too high. 2 years later, Paris greeted Adele with gray autumn rain. She sat in a small cafe in Montmartre, watching the Louisville news on her tablet. Time had changed many things, but the habit of keeping track of the past remained. Vincent Holt found guilty, the headline read. Life in prison for the murder of Marcus Tate and other crimes. The waiter brought an espresso. Adele set the clipboard aside, watching the rain blur the outlines of passers-by outside the window. Her gallery in Paris was thriving after selling bitcoins. She had enough money for a new start. The bell above the door jingled. A man in a gray trench coat entered, shaking drops off his umbrella. Ruth had aged, but her eyes retained their former vivacity. You found me after all. It wasn't easy. Her friend sat down across from her. Louis helped. Adele tensed. Do you communicate with him? Sometimes. He comes into my store a lot. Bought it, can you believe it? Said vintage clothes are a good investment. Why are you here, Ruth? Brought something. She pulled out an envelope. Elizabeth's last letter, the one she wrote before she died. Adele took the envelope carefully. The paper was yellowed with time. Where did you find it? In Marcus's things. Louis discovered the stash in the old house when it was being restored. The letter was short. Dear Marcus, I know they've figured it out. Henry has discovered our meetings, and Holt is threatening to expose the stock fraud. If anything happens to me, protect our son. Don't let them turn him into the same monster. I've hidden the evidence of their crimes in a safe deposit box. The code to the safe is Louis's date of birth. Use it only as a last resort. I'm sorry I dragged you into all this. Elizabeth. So she did love him. Adele folded the letter. And so did he her. Ruth sipped her coffee. You know what else is interesting? Marcus was on a business trip the day she disappeared. He has an ironclad alibi. Then who? Jerome confessed at the last hearing. It was Holt's hit, but Henry was the shooter. Holt just helped hide the body. Outside the window, the rain intensified. The streets of Montmartre had turned into mirrors, reflecting the lights of the cafes. And Marcus? Why did he keep quiet for so many years? Because they threatened Louis. Ruth pulled out another document. Here's Jerome's statement. Holt has been blackmailing Marcus all these years. One wrong move and the boy would have an accident. So he started drinking and selling paintings. Yeah, and when he found out Holt was planning to get rid of him, he decided to keep the evidence. The bitcoins were just a way to keep the information. He knew sooner or later Louis would start looking for the truth. Adele remembered their last conversation with Marcus. His shaking hands, the smell of whiskey, the desperation in his eyes. I could have saved him. No. Ruth covered her hand with her own. He chose his own path, just like you chose yours. And Louis? How is he coping? Better than one might expect. Inherited his father's company after he committed suicide in prison. Completely rebuilt the business, cleaned up the corruption schemes. And the gallery? Turned it into an art center for young talent. Free exhibitions, grants to emerging artists. Says it's a way to honor his real father. Adele felt tears coming to her throat. Does he know I'm here? Of course. Ruth smiled. Who do you think gave me your address? A cell phone vibrated in her pocket, a message from an unfamiliar number. The truth was worth 5 dimes, but forgiveness is priceless. Take care of yourself. L. Attached to the message was a picture, a painting of a purple sunset in a new gallery. A plaque beneath it read, in memory of Marcus Tate and Elizabeth Kedley. Love is stronger than fear. He wants you back, Ruth said quietly. Not for good, just to attend the opening of the new wing of the gallery. It's going to be called Gardenia. Why? Because gardenias were his mother's favorite flowers, and because they held the key to the truth. Adele looked out the window. The rain had stopped, and the rays of the setting sun were breaking through the clouds. The red reflections on the wet paving stones reminded her of that painting in the gallery. You know, she turned to Ruth, I never understood why Marcus loved that sunset painting so much. And why is that? Because it doesn't have blood on it like everyone thought. It's a reflection of the sun, hope breaking through the darkness. She pulled out her phone, dialed back. I'll be there in a month. Keep the painting. Paris was slowly sinking into evening. Somewhere in the distance, the bells of the Sacré-Cœur rang. A new sunset was coloring the sky the same shades as the painting in the Louisville gallery. 5 coins for the truth, Adele whispered, and a lifetime for redemption. Ruth rose. Let's go. You have a month to prepare for your return. They stepped out into the evening Paris. A long journey home was ahead, where old secrets turned into new beginnings and the ghosts of the past learned to forgive.